watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country. Now, here's your host, former Alabama All-American, Mike Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back into this special Thursday edition of Roll Tide Daily. My name is Mike Johnson, once again bringing you the best 30 minutes of your day and my day and everybody else that is an Alabama fans' day. So hopefully you guys will continue to join us. Continue to chime in the comment section. I'm looking at Facebook. I'm looking at YouTube. I've got Twitter loaded up. Love interacting with you guys and talking about all the different topics of the day. Invite you to also share the show with your friends. Roll Tide Daily, obviously, Monday through Thursday, 1 o'clock Eastern time. So I hope you guys will continue to kind of chime in the comment section. Craig A.G. already weighing in. Roll Tide Roll from Auburn. He chimes in the comment section. So a lot of you guys chimed in yesterday on a lot of the question of the day. The day before, we've been having a lot of good conversation this week. Want to keep that going, actually, and drop another question on the day for you guys today. We're going to talk about running backs a little bit later in the show. We're going to talk about stats, what we expect throughout the season. Bama Online 247 Sports did a great job of kind of projecting some of that. So we're going to ask the question, who is the greatest running back in Alabama history? That's the question of the day today. We're going to be talking on that in the comment section for some time to come. Got a lot of you guys chiming in. William Pratt, RTR from Atlanta, right down the street from us. Jerry Bussey, RTR from St. Petersburg. The Tide is coming, says Melissa Walker, RTR from Anniston, Mary Side. So keep chiming in. We're going to keep talking about that question of the day. Who is the greatest running back in Alabama history? A lot of great ones to choose from. Derrick Henry, Shaun Alexander, Mark Ingram. A lot of those guys on down the list that we're going to get to talking about later in the show. A lot of great people to kind of chime in. Donald and Brittany Schultz already chiming in. Mark Ingram. I think that's going to be a lot of the answers, but Kenneth Darby was another teammate of mine. A lot of good names really to choose from as we look on down that list. Kind of the hot topic today that we're going to get to in topic number one, though, and let's get rolling with that, is these new redshirt rules that the NCAA has come out with yesterday. If you've been following along, if you haven't been under a rock, you've probably followed a lot of the new rules coming out from the NCAA as far as redshirts go. Now, as most of you guys know, you can't play in any games throughout your redshirt year, or you didn't used to. The NCAA releases this yesterday, one of their notes kind of coming out of this new meetings they had this summer. College athletes competing in Division I football can participate in up to 4 games in a season without using a season of competition. It allows football players to preserve a season of competition if, for example, injuries or other factors result in them competing in a small number of games. Now, I, for one, as a former student athlete, absolutely love this. Do I wish this had come along when I was in school? Absolutely. I can sit here and name off a laundry list of players that would have been affected by this back when I was in college. I don't think there's really any detractors as far as this new rule goes. If you're a Bama fan kind of following along with what last year was like, I mean, just imagine the possibilities had you been able to put a guy like Mac Jones in against Ole Miss and Vanderbilt in those blowout games. Kind of save Tua for the end of the year against possibly Auburn or Clemson or Georgia in the national title game. Keep a year of Tua on campus. That would have been a great thing. I think that's kind of an interesting way to look forward as how this could affect it. In my own career, Chance Warmack, DJ Fluker, Bobby Greenwood, all guys that were kind of on the cusp of getting on the field throughout their redshirt seasons that never quite made it happen, or kind of burned up that eligibility throughout one year by playing in 1 or 2 games. So definitely a double-edged sword, but I think as far as we go along, there's not going to be many detractors when you talk about this rule. Now, I think the Bama fans, for the most part, they see that rule and they kind of ask themselves the question, well, how does this affect us? How does this affect us moving forward? What are we going to see throughout this rule? As you guys know, Nick Saban is always on the cutting edge of things like this. So I've kind of put together a list of players I think might be kind of affected by this in the coming years. And to me, this is not going to be the Savion Smiths, right? This is not going to be the Patrick Surtains, a guy you expect to be on the field early and often. It's not going to be a Jalen Waddle, who you kind of expect to be one of those guys maybe in the return game, maybe one of those true freshman explosive receivers. I don't think it quite affects guys like that. But when we look at the list, let's talk about the offensive line. We've lost a couple of transfers already this season. Dallas Warmack, Brandon Kenny, we'll get to him in just a second. Let's talk about Emil Ekiyor. Let's talk about Tommy Brown. Let's talk about some of the infusion of new talent along that offensive line that'll be coming in next season. Now, what happens if Ross Pierschbacher gets hurt at center? Brandon Kennedy would have been his backup. Then all of a sudden you look at a guy like Emil Ekiyor to kind of step into that season. If he only has to do it for 1 game, if he only has to do it for 2, 3 games, he can keep that red shirt and still be noticed as a freshman the next season. Also, let's look at some of the DBs in the signing class from last year. I'm talking about Jalen Armour-Davis, Josh Jobe, Eddie Smith. These are all guys you expect to kind of be role players in the secondary next year. What happens if you get in the season and a Patrick Surtain gets dinged up, or a Trevon Diggs, or a Savion Smith, or Deontay Thompson? You plug one of these guys in, one of the Josh Jobs of the world that really can plug in for one game and kind of move forward and be a part of the kind of rotation for as long as you need them to be without burning a year. Now, you want these guys to learn on the job. I think that having these guys showing up in the summer, learning under Nick Saban, being able to get adjusted to that defense is going to be a huge deal. You don't want to speed up the learning curve. So you also don't want to use one game to burn up that red shirt. I think that's why this is such a widely accepted rule when you look at it from afar. I think this could have been a great help to Alabama last year in the national championship run. I think there's a number of players you would have loved to get on the field. There's a number of years used by players that you would have loved to preserve last year, especially when you look at the number of freshmen. Let's talk about Alex Leatherwood. I mean, here's a guy who didn't play a ton last year, a 5-star freshman, plays half in the national championship game. He's a guy that burned up a year last year that you'd love to have him on the campus. C.J. Watson weighing in the Facebook comment section. That rule would have been huge last year for Alabama's linebackers. I completely agree. Look at a guy like Dylan Moses. Look at some of the other guys really you had to piece in there, Jamie Mosley being another one. Now, these guys wouldn't all be affected there in year one, but that's just what I mean. When you look at some of the guys, Cameron Latou is another guy coming in this year, outside linebacker, kind of a rush defensive end. That's a guy who you could really preserve a year as far as moving along through the program. And these guys, wouldn't have to burn up that year. They get an extra year in the program. They wouldn't have to worry about leaving after 4, or they wouldn't have to be worrying about getting out after 3, and those things that accompany some of that time you get in terms of some of the things coming along. You guys continue to weigh in the comment section. Some of you guys are already chiming in on the question of the day. We've got a couple of Mark Ingrams in there. We've got a couple of Derrick Henrys. Jazz Hatcher says Derrick Henry, he carried that team. #workhorse. Completely agree with that. I think that he was an exceptional running back. We're going to kind of weigh some of his numbers here in a little bit when we get onto that topic about projected numbers for Damian Harris this coming year. Craig Agee weighing in about the rule change. Should be able to keep the young guys' attention too, knowing they could go in at any time. I absolutely agree with that. That was one of those guys that got redshirted. When you showed up to the field, there was never really that urge that you might be able to go in. I think that changes things, kind of gets them, the younger guys, to kind of lock in, make sure they're paying attention to the game plan. I also think it changes the way you kind of rotate on the practice squad in terms of moving forward. But we all know Nick Saban really is usually ahead of the curve when it comes to things like this. Just a footnote as far as rule changes go, Brandon Kennedy, the guy that all this rule changes kind of come to fruition last week or 2 weeks ago in the SEC spring meetings, he announces that he's going to wind up at Tennessee and kind of join forces back again with Jeremy Pruitt. Tennessee needs a ton of help on the offensive line, as most of you guys know that watched that game square off against Alabama last year. Brandon Kennedy should fit right in as far as that goes. Down to Brittany Schultz weighing back in on the question of the day. If Derrick Henry would have been around in the 80s, he may have been the Bo Jackson. Victoria Lynn Burnick weighing in. Henry was better than Ingram. Both awesome, though. And James Perkins weighing in about the linebackers. Our pass rush is going to be great for the next few years. Completely agree with that when you look at the names that'll be taking the field. So without further ado, we want to kind of transition into topic number 2. And this is something we've kind of been on for the last few days. We've talked about, AL.com and how they kind of went out to all the sports information directors from all 14 SEC schools, and they voted on their number 1 offense, the preseason All-SEC offense, the preseason All-SEC defense, the order of these teams are going to finish. Well, yesterday, AL.com releases kind of their superlatives for the offseason. Now, I won't bore you guys and go completely on down this list, but I think there are some right here I want to put in front of you that are worth mentioning. Now, the top one for me, and this is not a popular opinion sitting here in Atlanta, Georgia, Jake Fromm from Georgia being the MVP next year, a little bit of a head scratcher to me. I'm not gonna throw praise on Tua Tagovailoa this early in his career, but let's look at a guy like Jared Stidham as somebody who could have possibly taken the reins of MVP voting. A little bit of a head scratcher as far as that goes. Now, the most underrated Mizzou tight end, top Heisman candidate, Drew Lock. He's obviously getting a lot of love at the top of the NFL draft. I don't think that's anything to shake your head at. Top athlete being McCole Hardman from Georgia. I would have probably given the nod to Deebo Samuel as far as that goes, but this is not something where I'm going to keep throwing in Alabama players to be mentioned kind of in the same breath. Now, I think what is interesting for the Bama fans to look at this, notice this at the bottom now. Top quarterback goes to Jake Fromm from Georgia. You go down to one little category, and top passer goes to Tua Tagovailoa. A little bit of a head scratcher there for you. Some people trying to wrap their head around what exactly that means, especially a guy that is a passer like Jake Fromm. He's not a dual threat quarterback, so to give the top passer to Tua and the top quarterback to Jake Fromm is a little bit of a head scratcher to me. I love Tua being the top passer. I think he's got all the ability in the world. I obviously expect him to be the starting quarterback next year, and I think that's what a lot of people are looking at. Couple of other guys mentioned in the same breath there. Top running back's going to be Damian Harris. I think that's a heck of a pick. I don't know what kind of carries he gets. We'll cross that bridge in just a second, talking about what possibly his output could come to. Top offensive lineman, to me, this is a slam dunk. I think you could look at Greg Little from Ole Miss as maybe weeding his way in there, but Jonah Williams, we kind of covered him yesterday, being the possible number 4 pick in the NFL draft this coming year. A lot of the scouts have come out and said there's no questions really you can have about Jonah Williams. He's tough. He's a good pass protector, good run blocker. He plays in a good program, plays in a pro style of offense. There's no question you're really going to have about him moving forward. All you guys continue to weigh in back in the comment section. Our guy Shannon Burgess over on YouTube, the resident LSU fan watching the show, does Coffee get mentioned in that conversation? I'm not super knowledgeable on the Bama running back grades. I wish he did. I really enjoyed blocking for Glenn Coffee, but he left a year early. He's probably a victim of one of those redshirt rules we're just talking about. Glenn Coffee gets redshirted in 2005. He might be one of those guys that's at the top of that list, but he left after his junior year, obviously. One of the other just quick notes I want to make on the superlatives from AL.com, CeCe Jefferson from Florida getting the nod as the top defensive lineman in the conference. I think this is a complete snub in the face of Raekwon Davis, Isaiah Buggs, and anybody else really you want to mention along Bama's defensive line, but Raekwon Davis to me is the easy answer when it comes to this. Also a couple guys down at LSU I think got snubbed. CeCe Jefferson, to me, a little bit of a logjam in the back of the pack. I don't know that his career is what a lot of people thought he would be when he showed up in Gainesville as a 5-star defensive lineman. You guys continue to weigh in on the question of the day in the comment section. Dean Mitchell saying Derrick Henry was a beast. I also love watching Sean Alexander run. Greg Whittick, Derrick Henry tied Mark Ingram. Absolutely. We're going to get into kind of breaking them down. Donald and Brittany Schultz. Damian Harris is very underrated. If he had the same amount of carries as Bryce Love and other top backs, he would have led the nation. We're going to get into his carries, like I said, in just a second, kind of moving on down that list. Enrique Murillo weighing in. As a Georgia fan, I don't see Fromm being an MVP. He will have success, but as a running team, it's hard to win those categories. Top passer to me will be Stidham or Locke. I think that it would be easy to put Locke in that category as well. I'm comfortable with Tua, obviously, as a Bama fan. Enrique, appreciate you weighing in as a Georgia fan on that topic. I think it's always interesting to kind of note some of those guys and how fans are feeling. I haven't run up against a lot of criticism as far as my criticism of Jake Fromm. I think that's kind of an iffy pick as far as the MVP goes. But if you got an MVP and a Heisman lock and a quarterback and a passer, you're bound to get some things kind of stirred around. I'm surprised Jarrett Stidham didn't get more love. I think a lot of Alabama fans tend to look at that the same way. Now, I do want to transition a little bit, and we've been talking about top running backs, and you guys continue to weigh in the comment section. Greg Zachary kind of weighing in about the best running back. It's like saying, what's my favorite buffet? Bama has so many good running backs. It has kind of been an RBU over the last few years or so. But our friends at 247 Sports, I think, did a great job. And it really got me thinking. I know it probably gets a lot of you guys thinking. 247 Sports, Bama Online, a lot of the great writers over there that are doing some good things. They put out some projections yesterday. They wanted to talk about projecting some of the stats throughout this coming season. And I thought it was really interesting. Now, I picked out 3 that I thought were of pretty good note in terms of being guys that are really going to stand out. I think we have those stats to show you guys right here. Now, pay attention to these top 2 because I think the Harris brothers or whatever you want to call them, this kind of a tandem as far as that goes, that's going to be something to watch throughout the year. Running back Damian Harris, 173 carries, 1,159 rushing yards, 14 touchdowns. Now, they go on to say Najee Harris, 121 carries, 700 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns. I think that's crazy to follow. Now, I did tuck in on the back end. We talked about Mack Wilson a ton yesterday, about him really trying to be mentioned in that all SEC caliber of category as far as linebackers go, along with Devin White, some of the other linebackers throughout the conference. 101 tackles, 5 interceptions, 4.5 sacks. They have him sitting at. I do want to go back, however, to Damian Harris because this is a topic that continues to come up for so many people talking about Bama running backs. Where does Damian Harris fit at all time in terms of running back? I think this guy was shocking a lot of people this past year when he announced that he was going to show back up in 2018 and play football. Bo Scarborough ended up being the guy that left and headed on to the NFL, obviously being a draft pick, but Damian Harris says he wants to come back. Now, I think it's interesting what 247 Sports had to say about Damian Harris. I think we have that quote to show you guys right here. Damian Harris, Alabama's bell cow, is back for another season and try to get another ring within an offense that should take full advantage of his strengths as an every down caliber back. Damian Harris is one of college football's most underrated and consistent ball carriers and should see career highs in every category as a senior. Now, I did highlight for you guys a minute ago what they kind of expect from Damian Harris. It wasn't a ton of carries. Obviously, you're going to look and say 173 carries. Boy, that's a ton. Just to give you guys a little footnote and a little bit of insight into just how little carry that is, Derrick Henry in 2015 in the Heisman campaign, when he really took over, you guys remember that Iron Bowl when he kind of had 40 attempts right there at the end, absolutely just running it down the throat. He had that little 35-yard touchdown at the end of the Iron Bowl. For anybody that bets on the Iron Bowl, he covered the spread with 7 seconds left on a 35-yard touchdown run. In 2015, Derrick Henry had 395 rushing attempts. That was the single season rushing leader all time in the SEC. 395 rushing attempts. That's a ton. That kind of brings back down what you think about Damian Harris next season. It also makes it even more astounding that they expect him to have 1,159 rushing yards. Now, I say all that to kind of weigh the impact of what Damian Harris might be. I think when you look at the list of Bama's all-time leading running backs, I think that Damian Harris can make a run at this thing. I really do. Now, let's look at the list here. Derrick Henry has 3,591 yards. Sean Alexander, 3,565. That's second place. Bobby Humphrey in third, 3,420. Kenneth Darby in fourth, 3,332. If Damian Harris gets the yardage that 247 Sports and Bama Online think he's going to get at 1,159 yards next year, that puts him square in the category at number 4 on the list of all-time leading rushers. Now, I do think there is the chance and the opportunity that Damian Harris gets more of that. I think that this could be shaping up to be a lot like 2015, where you have Derrick Henry, but you have other running backs sharing the load. As you get later in the season, though, a guy like Damian Harris can really tend to take over and a lot of the things that's going on in that offense. Maybe Damian Harris does get the ball, 30-plus times against Auburn. Maybe you do use him 30-plus times in an SEC championship game. Use him really as a bell cow back throughout the playoffs and some of the things you're asking that offense to do. I do love a lot of these other guys on the list. I'm not going to go out. Now, TJ Yeldon is that guy in 5th place right now, 3,322. Remember, he did share a lot of that career with a guy like Derrick Henry, so it's absolutely ridiculous what you expect those guys to do in the backfield. And the fact they're both in the top 5 in terms of Alabama's all-time leading rushers is ridiculous. Donald and Brittany Schultz weighing back in the Facebook comment section. With Tua back there, our running backs are going to thrive. Absolutely agree with that. I think the explosiveness of the wide receivers, Tua being a really deep threat as a passing quarterback, are one of those things that you really have to pay attention to as far as those guys go. I think that conversation is going to continue to go on. Terrence Branyan weighing in 8 yards per carry. That's what's so crazy about Damian Harris to me. That's why he's so underrated. It's lateral ability, really the ability to find that gap up front and then explode through it, that north and south speed. And when you have that combination, it's a combination a lot of people don't have. It's a combination that Derrick Henry did have, that top end speed and that big body to kind of get laterally. Joe Simmons weighing in. Can we just play college football all year? Just kidding. I'm ready for fall to get here. Boy, you're not the only one. I don't know what the Louisville countdown is. I think we're somewhere around 80 days as far as that goes. But, man, I don't think you can get here fast enough. Victoria Lynn Burdick weighing back in. Just love Damian and Najee. Such infectious personality on the team, but I think Damian is my favorite. It's going to be interesting to see kind of the bulk of those carries. I actually am a huge fan of Josh Jacobs. I know that doesn't get mentioned a ton. He's one of those guys that kind of sits in the background, but he reminds me of one of my old teammates and Roy Upchurch, kind of that guy in the background that doesn't really show up until crunch time, and when you need him, boy, he explodes on the scene. William Lee weighing in over in the YouTube comment section. Damian Harris never got 20 carries in a game last year. Brian Hall also saying Damian Harris carries himself with class and is a very hard worker. Absolutely agree with that. Now, I was stunned, for one, like I said earlier, I was stunned this guy landed back with the program this year in 2018, but I think I echo the sentiments of everybody in the comment section when I say, boy, we are absolutely glad to have him. Terrence Branyan kind of weighing in saying Yeldon would have had so much for if not for the fumbles and missed security in the NFL. Go figure. I absolutely agree with that. I was down in Baton Rouge when he fumbles on the 4-yard line coming out. I thought the game was over at that point, and Bama pulls the stunner and is able to pull that one off. I know our boy Shannon Burgess over in the YouTube comment section, LSU fan, absolutely probably remembers that. TJ Yeldon fumbling, I think it was the 4 or the 6-yard line coming out. So definitely a couple things to weigh in there as far as running back. Keep your comments coming in. Donald Brittany Schultz saying Harris, your pain layers. Absolutely agree with that. It's going to be a heck of a running back tandem for us to kind of watch in 2018. Pivoting to our next topic, though, and you guys, listen, I'm up and down when it comes to Colin Cowherd and some of these national media opponents, but I did think it was interesting yesterday. Our buddy Clay Travis, right, from Outkick the Coverage, he had some interesting thoughts talking to SEC Country about what he thinks as far as Nick Saban's tenure upcoming and what he could possibly do with a quarterback as elite as Tua Tagovailoa in the backfield. Here's what Clay Travis had to say yesterday with this quote graphic right here, and I'll read it to you guys. I think Saban fears not coaching. And so I think he is now going to hold on for as long as he can at Alabama. Boy, we can all hope that that happens, right? And frankly, if you look at Tua and what they've got, the most amazing thing to me of Nick Saban's entire tenure is he has kind of flown in the face of everybody else in terms of dominating without a traditionally dominant quarterback. Now, let's break this statement down into two parts, first of all. Nick Saban being scared of anything to me is a little bit ridiculous. Now, do I hope that happens? Do I hope our buddy Clay Travis is right? Absolutely. I hope that Nick Saban fears not coaching. I hope he sticks around Tuscaloosa for another 10 or 12 years. I don't so much think that happens. I think that, we're probably somewhere under the 10-year, between the 5 and 10-year margin for Nick Saban right now. This is a guy that's going on 67 years of age. Is just kind of getting in that, that era of, 70 years old when a lot of coaches step away from the game. So I'm just not sure what to think as far as his tenure goes, but I don't think it's really decided on by fear. I think it's decided on by Miss Terry and when she's ready to move into the lake house up there at Lake Burton in North Georgia. So with that being set aside, let's talk about the Tua Tagovailoa angle as far as this goes. Now, I do agree with Clay Travis here that I don't think that Nick Saban has had a passer as elite as Tua Tagovailoa has. Now, I do have to call Clay Travis out on one thing, though. At no point has Bama, in Nick Saban's tenure, has Bama been deficient as far as quarterbacks go. Now, I do have the list in front of me to where their quarterbacks have finished on the ranking of passers and passing yardage in Nick Saban's time. 2017, 9th. 2016, 4th. 2015 with Jake Coker, that's 4th. 2014 with Blake Sims, he is the single-season all-time passing leader at Alabama. They finished 2nd in the SEC that year. McCarron's 3 years, 5th, 6th, and 3rd. McElroy's 2 years, 5th and 8th. John Parker Wilson had 5th and 4th. So at no point did, despite what Clay Travis has to say here, has Bama been deficient in the passing game. It's just one of those things where you look at it and say, maybe Tua Tagovailoa does go to the next level. Not only that, maybe he helps out that running game to kind of get to the next level. Maybe Tua Tagovailoa being able to throw those dime balls over to the top to, Devontae Smith and Jerry Jeudy and all those guys, that young wide receiver core. Maybe that does open up the offense and get to the next level. Now, will that change the way Nick Saban decides on the end of games? I think that's another thing that can be in dispute. I think when you get into the 3rd and 4th quarter, Nick Saban is always going to be a run-first head coach. I don't think this is one of those things where you say, boy, we got Tua, let's let him spread it around the field. I don't think that's the way it's going to work. Tua's going to pile up his passing yards early in the game. And it's going to be one of those things where, Nick Saban still plays his game manager game, still wants most of the minutes with his offense holding the ball. And so that ground and pound attack, probably one of those things that tends to come to fruition. A lot of people weighing in still in the comment section. Kenny Edens says, don't sleep on Brian Robinson. He's going to be a big contributor. I agree. I've heard incredible things out of Tuscaloosa from that coaching staff about what they think about Brian Robinson. Really a guy who's under the radar, but's made a great transition as far as that work. Shannon Burgess weighing in the YouTube comment section about TJ Yeldon's fumble down in Baton Rouge. Yes, ... still hurts. I know that has to hurt, man. I was deflated for LSU fans on that day. That was a crazy game to kind of watch. Joe Simmons weighing in with a good comment. Look at all the skilled positions. If the O-line gels, this offense is going to be setting some records. It's scary to think what we saw in just half of football. That was on the biggest stage of college football. Not only that, but top 5 defense over there in Georgia, and Kirby Smart, who knows that Alabama football team like the back of his hand, really being able to kind of take over. So appreciate you guys, continuing to weigh in the comment section. Continue to, Kenny Edens, Donald and Brittany Schultz, all you guys really had great comments all day. Terrence Branion's another guy, William Lee, Brian Hall, all you guys in the YouTube comment section as well. Appreciate you guys weighing in today as far as all those topics go. A lot of good things going on for Bama as a team, as an offense, as superlatives. It's going to be fun to kind of watch this group throughout 2018. Now, one group I do want to bring up is the 1992 group. We talked yesterday a little bit about future opponents we'd love to see Alabama kind of match up against in the future. One of mine was Miami under Mark Richt, kind of a rematch of that 92 Sugar Bowl. As you guys know, today is Throwback Thursday, so one of the videos I wanted to bring y'all was something that's even better than the matchup. I think that when you talk about this game, you talk about George Teague, you talk about the Strip. I couldn't talk about Miami and Alabama yesterday without the Throwback Thursday video being our guy George Teague in the Strip back in that 1992 Sugar Bowl. Here it is right here.
Blitz. Passes away, penalty flag down. Lamar Thomas has got it. Lamar Thomas is on his way down the sideline. George Teague is after him and runs him down. Takes the ball away from him. Teague's got the ball. And they tackle Teague back at the 12.
Well, you just got to love that right there. I don't know that I ever get tired of Keith Jackson's voice. Now, I was, probably, I was probably 5 years old when this game was being played. I think I was back in kindergarten in 1992, but got a chance actually to meet Keith Jackson for the coin toss out in Pasadena in 2009. A lot of you guys remember, and being able to speak to him for that small little moment out on the field for the coin toss, being a captain against Texas, something I'll never forget. And looking back on that game, I know a lot of people get chill bumps. A lot of Bama fans weighing in on that. Donald and Brittany Schultz saying, Keith Jackson, I miss his enthusiasm. He just has a timeless voice, doesn't he? And that George Teague play against Miami is one of those things that Alabama fans will never forget. Shannon Burgess saying, watch that game. I was a senior in high school. I was a happy camper being an SEC homer. I love hearing that. I think that's one of the games that when I talk to Alabama fans, everybody remembers that matchup against Miami in 1992 as being just one of those timeless things. Victoria Lynn Burdick weighing in and says, are you bringing back the Deuce, Stacey Copeland Curry for some Throwback Thursday? Just a little bit of that George Teague, and obviously we'll continue to do that throughout the Thursdays while we do Roll Tide Daily. Appreciate all you guys watching on the show today. As I say every week or every day, this is my favorite 30 minutes. I hope it's your favorite 30 minutes of the day as well. Hope you guys will have a great Thursday and a great weekend. We won't be here tomorrow. We'll be back Monday. Remember, if you guys are fans of SEC Country Live, we'll be back on this afternoon, myself and Brandon Adams at 3 o'clock Eastern Time on the SEC Country Facebook page. But until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great weekend and Roll Tide.
You've been watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country.